In 1989, computers didn't connect to the cloud, hackers weren't overseas, and viruses didn't spread by email.
Yep. They spread by what we would call today snail mail.
A biologist mailed thousands of floppy disks to scientists around the world with a hidden payload.
What was that payload? Well, it was one of the first ransomware attacks in known history.
This is True Cyber Crimes, where we examine the roots of cyber attacks that shaped the digital age.
I'm Nick Santilli.
And I'm Chris Kuselis. Today, how a man claiming to fight AIDS delivered a virus of his own and held files hostage with a 3.5-inch floppy disk.
In December of 1989, thousands of floppy disks arrived in mailboxes around the globe. Something that was pretty, this is pretty typical if you were like AOL online, right? They were sending disks out all the time. So this was not, it's like QR codes today. We're used to seeing QR codes and we scan them. So it wasn't out of the ordinary.
And for those who remember, for a penny, you could get like 8 albums on disc or tape,
right?
Cassettes mailed to you. So you're right; it was a pretty normal thing. But these ones were a little different. They were labeled AIDS information, introductory diskette. Seemed innocent enough, just a research tool from a medical nonprofit. And if you were alive back then, AIDS was a horrible disease that was happening, and they were trying to do everything they could to figure it out in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, definitely something to grab that attention and gain interest. So who was the sender? Dr. Joseph Popp, who was an evolutionary biologist and former contractor for the World Health Organization.
Yeah, that's right. He wasn't some hacker in a hoodie. He was actually a Harvard-educated PhD and with a resume in public health.
But instead of fighting viruses in the biological sense, he unleashed one digitally.
Recipients included AIDS researchers, subscribers to health journals, and attendees for the World Health Organization, or better known as the WHO, AIDS conference that was going to take place in a few months in Europe.
So tucked inside those disks, a Trojan horse program. Interesting for a biologist to have coded a Trojan horse, but it was one that quietly installed itself and waited.
And here's an interesting piece. Popp didn't just send these disks randomly. He had targeted lists. Many of the recipients were attendees of the WHO AIDS conference in Stockholm. He knew exactly who he was reaching out to.
Yeah, it's like fishing before fishing. Think of a name for that. Floppy fishing. Anyway,
I'll let you work on that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll brainstorm. He exploited trust in a scientific community that was desperate for collaboration.
Yeah, and the real irony here is Popp had once applied for a grant to study AIDS. When rejected, he may have turned that frustration into a vendetta. The program didn't trigger right away. It counted how many times you booted your computer, and after a certain amount of times, it would trigger.
Yeah, so after about 90 reboots, which back then we didn't just leave our computers on, all day, every day for weeks and months at a time. So, this may have been about 3 months. It activated. So files then became invisible and the directory scrambled itself.
Yeah, I had to think about that 90 reboots thing. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was like, boy, my machine can run for months and months until I'm told it has to shut down. So yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. But so then after it hit that magical number and it rebooted, the screen flashed a message, and the message said, in order to obtain a license for continued use of your system, please send $189 to PC Cyborg Corporation, P.O. Box 87, Panama City, Panama. And the other piece I found out doing a little bit of research on this, that 189, that was only for 1 year of protection on your computer. If you sent him $389, he would give you a lifetime subscription to free him up from this. So he was already, thinking about this.
He was ahead of his time. Yeah.
Subscriptions. Yeah.
We're all about subscription software and services today. He was about 35 years too early, or not too early. But this was ransomware, and it was before we had that term. In fact, that 90 reboots is still in my head. That makes it nearly probably impossible at the time for any of those users to figure out where and how this came from. You know, like
they did. Yeah.
The fact that they put a disk in and 90 reboots later, which again could be months, you know, weeks, months later, we didn't have like digital forensics then like we have now. So, you know, as we think about the birth of ransomware, this is one of the first documented malware attacks that encrypted files as a form of extortion. There was no internet backdoor in those days. It relied entirely on physical delivery. Victims were instructed to send physical money to an offshore mailbox. And just one other quick comment on that. So this is 1989. Interestingly, just a couple months ago, so this, you know, early 2025, 36 years later, I had a client reach out to me. They received a physical letter in the mail saying that they had been compromised and breached, and to scan the QR code in the letter to for payment. They had not been breached. This was purely somebody just licking a stamp and printing a letter and sending it out to a bunch of places in hopes that they, you know, so interesting that this, you know, not full circle, but 5 years later, we're seeing an instance of people going, let's just try the physical world instead of all this internet mumbo jumbo.
Sometimes you got to go back to the old ways of work, man. That's what it takes.
Back to the basics.
Oh, so and the encryption, you know, it's crude by today's standards, but for 1989, man, it worked.
Yeah, victims were locked out of their files, and you know, in those days, completely out of options. And you know, if you think about 1989, the personal computer PCs weren't inexpensive like they are now.
No.
That was probably just a massive hit to take.
Yeah. So. And there was a real paper trail, I think, in this one. So Dr. Joseph Popp was arrested in Amsterdam Schiphol Airport soon after the disks were traced back to him. He wasn't, you know, he was no Sherlock Holmes, or he was no, you know, good criminal, I don't think. But
right. Yeah. So when they apprehended him, what they find in his suitcase? Conveniently, a list of names, a manifesto, and plans for future, you know, what we would call cyber attacks. One of the strangest details is Popp reportedly told authorities that he planned to use the ransom money to fund AIDS research. He even claimed the attack was a form of ethical extortion.
Ethical extortion. Is ethical extortion legal? No.
Well, I like the.
Yeah. That's a phrase you don't easily forget. Ethical extortion.
No. So in court, he didn't just wear a box on his head. He also smeared Vaseline on his face and accused the judge of being infected with a virus that he created.
I wish I could see. I wish they had video on those. That would be great. So you know, it was really part circus, part cautionary tale, and it made headlines not just for the crime, but you know, for the spectacle that he made of himself and of the court.
Yeah. Ultimately, Dr. Popp was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial. Oh, that's one tactic.
Well, you know, so whether delusional or calculated, Popp showed the world something that was really pretty terrifying, how vulnerable our digital systems could be to one person with physical access.
And this was just the beginning.
Yeah, the attack now is recognized as really the first known ransomware incident.
Yeah, he used floppy disks that in turn induced and used fear, and it used trust in science against scientists themselves.
Yeah, a group of folks who never thought they'd see anything like that. People just wanted to help each other out, and they got burnt. But you know, unlike today's criminals, it didn't hide behind botnets or proxies. It did hide behind some Vaseline in a box, but this guy had a name and a face.
Yep. The tactics may seem outdated, but the strategy is echoed nearly every ransomware attack since then. Deliver malicious software in some way, snail mail, email, what have you. encrypt or lock down critical assets once you're in that system, demand payment, and leverage urgency and disruption. I mean, in this case, it was, hey, like we're trying to solve a global issue that everybody's worried about. Let's get into this, right? So they created that urgency. And then fast forward to today, and ransomware is significantly evolved, but the playbook hasn't really changed that much.
And I really wonder if he would have been more successful if he would have had a self-addressed prepaid return envelope in that. So they just could throw the money and they didn't have to think about it. But
yeah,
who knows? So, but to your point, it really hasn't changed. WannaCry 2017 used the leaked NSA exploit, ReEvil. So we get to hear about a new group, targeted corporations with multi-million-dollar demands. But really, the bones of the attack, they were still Dr. Popp's. I mean, it was still the framework that he used.
It's an interesting legacy to leave as a career and an educated biologist.
Yeah.
Today we've got ransomware as a service, which lets anyone with a few bucks and bad intentions rent and utilize an attack kit online, targeting whoever they want.
Popp needed a Harvard degree and a mailing list. Today, attackers need a Tor browser and a crypto wallet. And if that all sounds familiar, it's because it is exactly what hit Change Healthcare, Colonial Pipeline, and you name it, thousands of others.
Yeah, Joseph Popp showed the world that information could be weaponized, and he did it with a disk and a postage stamp. Something again. It doesn't take the internet, right? As this stuff has evolved, people will leave little, USB drives on the ground outside an office building, or, replace a QR code sticker in a restaurant for their restaurant to take you someplace else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of ways to weaponize information.
Yeah.
So, what do we learn from this attack way back in 1989, which, would now be called a cyber attack? Well, social engineering works even by snail mail. Trust is the weakest link in security. The zero trust principle of trust nothing and validate everything is something, unfortunately, we need to live by these days. Early threats often predict future trends, and what's old is new again. We're seeing instances of physical ransomware attempts. And innovation isn't always progress. Sometimes it's a blueprint for disaster. And maybe the strangest part, Popp's attack didn't even use the internet. As we've talked about, no phishing links, no remote access, just a floppy diskette, a label, and unfortunately misplaced trust.
Yeah, it's a real reminder that cybercrime isn't always high tech. Sometimes it's just high consequence. And maybe the most important takeaway is ransomware isn't new, but if our defenses aren't better, we're going to keep getting hacked.
Yep. So whether it's a floppy disk in 1989
or a cloud native 0-day in 2024,
really only takes one breach to rewrite the rules.
That's it for this episode of True Cyber Crimes.
Because in the digital world,
every bite
leaves a fingerprint.
Thanks, Nick. We'll talk to you next time.
Chris.